Hey guys, Stealth here. In this deck review we're looking at a Western Germany Mechanized Deck. Now Mechanized decks, you get a little bit of extra infantry, they lose some tank capability, and they do have a very high amount of vehicles available. Vensalir sent in this deck quite a while ago already, but I didn't get around to it because you guys keep sending me so many decks, which I think is great, but don't be surprised if it takes a while for me to get around to actually covering your deck. Anyway, Vensalir, sorry to keep you waiting. He wrote in the description of this deck, he says, "My Western Germany deck is designed to occupy large cities and forests with its infantry and operate around them with tanks in 2v2 plus games." So I'm going 2v2 to 4v4 with this thing. I'm not very good at micromanagement, hence the very large number of infantry units. I went for Panzer Grenadiers in M113s rather than Jaegers because at only 5 points more they have a lot more combat power. Absolutely true. So, seeing that he's operating in forests, let's first have a look at the logistics tab. If you're operating in forests and they do have a command zone, it would be nice to have command infantry available. And we might be able to scavenge 3 points to fill up one more slot there. Now, in a 2v2 game, the maps usually aren't huge, but it will take a little bit of time for your units to move around. And having 20 Jupiters going back and forth to your fob to keep resupplying your units on the front line is going to take a lot of time. So to make it a little faster, I'm going to delete one card of Jupiters and get one card of the CH-53s in. These guys are going to go back and forth to the fob. With their 320 kph, they're a lot faster than the Jupiters. The Jupiters can then take their supplies from the helicopter and ferry those to the front troops, either in the forest or elsewhere. Now, another trade or change you could make is have a look at the Jupiters versus the Mankadis, because the better the off-road speed, the faster you can resupply the units in the forests. The problem is that the Mankadis get a little bit less availability. You get 20 Jupiters, 10 Jupiters versus 7 Mankadis. Still, I think that 7 Mankadis is better than having the Jupiters because they got better off-road speed, 90 kph versus 70. They are big, however, and that does mean that they're going to be a little easier to spot and a lot more easy to hit. So whether you want to make this change as well is up to you, but I think that the Mankadi 6x6 are just a little bit better than the Jupiters, so I'm going to change those up as well. The command vehicle right now is an M577G, and this command vehicle is of course pretty capable as a standard command vehicle. You do get only 5 of them, but for 2v2 I think that's more than enough. Now, infantry. 80 units of infantry. And by the looks of it, these guys in the Marder 2s are veterans. We got Marder 1A1 carrying Panzer Grenadier 90s at Elite. Another slot of those, Panzer Grenadiers, another card of Elites, more Elites, another card of Elites, one card of Fallschirmjäger, one card of Fliegerfausts, and one card of Milan 2s at Hardened. Now, as you can see, and as he already mentioned in the description, this is a ton of units and a ton of infantry. He's using the Marder 2 for his Panzer Grenadier 90s, I think. Yeah, Panzer Grenadier 90s here. And then a lot of Panzer Grenadiers in Marder 1A1s. Now the difference between the 1A1 and the 1A2 and A3 is not that big, but you do get a little bit better accuracy on the 1A3 and you get a lot more frontal armor. Sorry, you get one more frontal armor. I confused them with the Warrior Milans there. You get 1 point more frontal armor, but the 25% accuracy versus the 15% is definitely significant. Other than that, they carry the Milan F2 versus the Milan F1, which has less accuracy and less AP power. So you could go with the F2 if you want to. Seeing that he's operating in forests mostly, it doesn't really matter if these guys are elite or hardened. And elite or veteran, because veteran is still very good, and it still gives you a very good amount of units. Start off with these Marder 2s. He has these at veteran. This is a good choice because that way you get the most of those Marder 2s with the Panzer Grenadiers. Then I'm going to delete all of these Panzer Grenadiers in the 1A1s because I want to get those at a little lower veterancy, which immediately allows me to get a couple more of them. Let's see, we got one more card of Panzer Grenadiers. You know, I'm just gonna delete these as well, because it's about to get really, really messy in here. And then the AA goes out. I'm just gonna completely reconstruct it. This is going to be the base infantry operating in forests. 30 infantry units should be enough. We can throw in one more card of standard Panzer Grenadiers or Jaegers. Jaegers are good enough. And he said that for 5 points more you get Panzer Grenadiers, which are a lot better. Yeah, a little bit. It depends a little bit on how you want to use them, because in a forest a Jaeger is definitely good enough. And for that reason, we're going to go with the standard Jaeger to fill up the rest of the infantry slots. So now we got 49 units, and now we can start looking at more specialized troops. We're going to go with the Milan 2s, and I'm not going to take 10 of those, but 7. Now, if he's operating inside and near forests with infantry and tanks, these guys can be used to cover towns to make sure that those enemy tanks don't roll up into the town. So that's why I'm going to go with these guys. Next, we need some sort of commando troops. Or actually, let's get the AA done first. We're going to go with the one card of prototype Fliegerfaust 2. They already got a good base accuracy of 70%, and I want as many of them as I can. So I'm going to go with 7 at hardened. And then we're going to bring in the... where are they? Here, the Fallschirmjäger. We got one card of 90s and 3 cards of standards. Now the standard versus the 90 is a pretty significant difference. They get an SMG versus an assault rifle, and this completely changes their role. An assault rifle, and especially this assault rifle, is great, but it just does not have the same power as the SMG does in towns. This is significant because this means that the Fallschirmjäger can do multiple things, whereas the Fallschirmjäger 90 can do multiple things, whereas the standard Fallschirmjäger are pretty much only good versus other infantry at close range. You can see that they have a range of 455 versus 525. They do not carry the same AT weapon either. They got the Law, and these guys got the Panzerfaust 3. Oh, sorry, this is not. It is a Law. It's a light anti-tank weapon, but they call it the Panzerfaust 44. These guys use the Panzerfaust 3. Now, don't be mistaken that this is an inferior weapon because it has lower numbers. In fact, it has way higher numbers in accuracy and AP power, so this is definitely a more interesting choice, the Fallschirmjäger 90. But the Fallschirmjäger they're nice to haves, but seeing that he's operating in forests mostly, we don't really need that many cards. So I'm going to go with one card, and then I'm going to see if I can redistribute those other 2 points more effectively, or I'm going to circle back later to this tab and see if I can deploy those points in here anyway. Moving on to support, he has a lot of AA. He has 12 Rolands, 5 Roland 3s and 7 Roland 2s. Comparing these shows you that the Roland 2s are inferior on pretty much every terrain except accuracy. And if you use these guys for longer range engagements with these scattered out, say in a 1-by-1 team, you get a decent AA range. But you could say that having 10 of these Roland 3s is still better than having 7 Roland 2s. For that reason, I'm going to delete those and get one more of those in. Then he has 5 Gepard A2s. These are the ones with the stingers, and the ones of the A1 variety. Now, I'm not a great fan of the stinger. I know that it's a nice weapon to have, but it doesn't really do a lot against choppers because you only carry 4 of them. The range is pretty low, it's only 2275, and while it does have a high accuracy, its HE power is somewhat lacking. And that's why I usually go with 2 cards of Gepard A1s, because that gives me 14 or 10 of these things, and that's usually more than enough. The Gepard A2, comparing them in accuracy wise, it's pretty much similar. The one reason why you would go with the A2 is having more stabilizer on this gun, otherwise it's the same platform. But okay, if this is his choice and he can play with this, I'm just gonna keep this in here. Then he has 7 mortars, And this is an excellent choice to support his infantry in those forests. You could make the case saying that with 10 Rolands and 7 Gepards you could delete this card and then bring 1 card of M110s to make sure that you can have some sort of long-range sniper support. But these things aren't stellar. Alternative could be the PZH 109A3, and if you compare these you're going to see a lower, I'm now comparing the same unit, brilliant. You're going to see a lower HE power on the 155mm. You're going to see more dispersion but a higher rate of fire. So whether you want to have one of these things in your deck is up to you, but I think that in a 2v2 to 4v4 it is nice to have. Although you could say that in a game like that there's usually someone else who's doing that job. Moving on to tanks, where we find 14 Leopard 2A1s, 10 Kylers, 10 Leopard 1A5s and 8 Leopard 2s. You definitely want to have these things in here. But I would prefer to have them at hardened, because a tank is something that pretty much by definition takes fire. And the more fire the unit is going to take and the higher the veterancy is, the less likely it is to panic, because that veterancy definitely helps with that. So I'm going to take out those Leopard 2A1s and switch them to hardened to make sure that they're a little more resistant to morale damage. He still has to operate near and inside forests, and for that I think he needs a little bit more leopards. The Leopard 1A5s are great tanks, but you get a higher amount of them if you use Leopard 1A4s. And you don't lose that much. The Leopard 1A4 has a slightly worse cannon, it has less accuracy, but you only push out of the forest very, very shortly, fire off a couple of shots and pull back in, so you don't really need a lot of armor either. And for that reason we're going to try and clean up one more card here. But it's hard to pick one, because the Kylers are very, very decent units to use in forests. Because they have this autocannon, they can really be effective at supporting your infantry versus either other infantry or vehicles or tanks which happen to get too close and take a lot of damage from that autocannon. Then he has the Leopard 2s, and well, maybe you need these, maybe you don't. It really depends on your playstyle. Because these guys are pretty much your heavy hitters, combined with the Leopard 2A1s. And if you only take Leopard 2A1s and then Leopard 1A5s, you could say that the gap is getting a little too high. There's not really a lot sitting between that 16 and 10 frontal armor. So I think that having Leopard 2s in here is a good choice. Actually, I'm going to make one more change. I'm going to take out one card of Leopard 2A1s and take one more card of Leopard 2s, because this gives me a little bit more tanks, decent armor, and you don't really lose that much from the Leopard 2A1 to the 2. You lose a bit of accuracy, you lose some AP power, some frontal armor, but otherwise it's pretty much the same unit. Oh yeah, and then there's the optics, of course. So this would be my ideal setup for tanks, combining or thinking of the mission profile that he has in mind of operating inside and near forests. Having these kind of tanks is probably going to be the best solution for that. In reconnaissance, I don't see enough units here actually. He got 7 Recon choppers, he has 7 Lux A1s and 10 Leopard 1A1s. Big fan of these. If you've seen my earlier videos you probably know about that by now. But what I miss here, especially if you're operating in forests, is the BGS. Because a Lux is pretty stealthy, but these things are more stealthy. They got good stealth versus medium stealth. So what I would do is use those 2 points which I scavenged out of the infantry tab and deploy them here. To just have a little bit more recon to make sure that I can spot everything. And I would deploy those in this CH-53G to make sure that I can deploy them quickly. So I'm going to take 10 of those, and if you lose these guys, well, they're only 10 points, they're not that interesting. In vehicles, interestingly, he's not using a lot of these slots, and a mechanized deck, you could say, really depends on this category. It depends a little bit on how you look at a mechanized deck and what the mission profile for that specific deck is. I don't really often fill up all these slots either, but mostly because West Germany doesn't really have that many interesting vehicles. What I would bring, if I could, is the Mortar VTS-1. Problem is though that he already has all slots filled up. He already spent all the activation points. Now I see that there are a lot of activation points over here in air, so we're going to have to pay a visit here first and see what kind of units he has in here, see if we can free up anything. He has 2 air superiority fighters, the F4F KWS. It's the best thing that the West Germans get, unfortunately, but it's still a very, very good fighter. Then he has a seaplane. He has 4 bombers, which is pretty on the high side. Because if you look at it from an activation point perspective, you just spent 5 points to get 2 units, and that makes them very, very expensive units. Whereas if we take those 5 points and put them in the vehicle tab, or maybe somewhere in Recon, you get more units for the same activation points. And looking at this air tab the way it is, I think it's a pretty good setup. The only thing that you might want to have in here is Alpha Jet Ace with their napalm to block off particular areas of forests, or to quickly clean up forests if you want to push into that area yourself. But for now, seeing that he has this much infantry already, I think that we don't need the Alpha Jet. So we're going to revisit the vehicle tab, and now I can bring my beloved Martyr VTS-1. 14 of these should be more than enough, and combine these with a couple of Leopards and Martyrs and you got a very, very decent punching power on these units. Then he has the Weasel TOW 2 in here, sorry, the Weasel 1 TOW 2 I should say. Still a very, very tiny vehicle. I mean, if you compare this to the Jaguar and then switch back to the Weasel, you're going to see just how small this thing is. But do not underestimate these, because even as they have low autonomy, they're extremely deadly to tanks. 25 AP power, 70% accuracy makes them extremely capable anti-tank vehicles. And that was something that we were lacking in this deck. So we're going to take out one of those, and we're going to bring it into 2 cards of 7 at Veteran. That was because we got a little bit more activation points and scavenged those from the air tab. And while the infantry do have high AT values on their weaponry, especially the Panzer Grenadiers and the Fallschirmjäger, they're all short-range weapons. They're 875. The tanks have decent anti-tank weaponry. 18 AP power is the highest that we got on the tanks. So we need to invest in vehicles with high AT tank capability. And that's why I'm going to go with the Weasel 2s. Then he has the Jaguar 2. This one has a little inferior missile on it. It has the ITOW versus the TOW 2. Of course the TOW 2 is going to win that any day of the week. But the Jaguar is a lot more autonomous. It has 500 kilometers autonomy versus 200. So you definitely need to keep an eye on these things and keep them near a road to make sure that your supply units or your supply choppers can resupply these guys. With that, the 60% accuracy and the 20 AP power is still very, very good on these guys. So you do want to keep them in here. Another unit that's nice to have, which you can spread around the map and which are very, very mobile, is the Milan 2 on a Jeep version. If you just bring a couple of these, say 10 of them, you spend, what do we spend here, 2 points. You get 10 Jeeps, which carry 40 missiles in total. 4 missiles per vehicle times 10 vehicles is 40 ATGMs. And that really rounds out the ATGM capability. Then he has a good anti-tank capability here. This is the long-range anti-tank section. So make sure that if you're using this deck, you do bring vehicles. Because these guys are the heavy hitters. These kill tanks, which is something that most of the vehicles and the airplanes and the other tabs don't do very well. He has 5 helicopters in this tab, which are always nice to have as a quick response force. It would be nice if we could bring another card of those to get a bit more of those in. But we got one more card or one more point to spend, which we can spend either on vehicles or infantry. And now I'm going to go with a little bit more infantry. We already got more than enough boots on the ground, as I usually call it. We got enough Panzer Grenadiers and Jaegers, so we don't need to have a look at some of those. We could bring in Fallschirmjägers, but those pretty much have an upgraded mission profile of these guys, so we don't need the Fallschirmjäger. We could bring in a Deckungsgruppe. These guys also provide us with a couple more Martyrs, which are always nice to have. and they come themselves with the Carl Gustaf M2. Now, a nice thing about these is that they can also fire at infantry, which is something that Carl Gustavs on normal infantry don't do very well. So with this you get a little bit more anti-infantry capability, but I think that AA at the moment has priority. The problem is that we can only bring in Fliegerfaust 1 with the red eyes. Now, red eyes are not exactly my favorite AA. They have very, very bad accuracy. So you either need to deploy a ton of them, or you need to level them up very, very much. An alternative is bringing one more card of Milan 2s, and with this you can try and sneak up on other units. But I think that this infantry is pretty vulnerable to helicopters. If there's an infantry push and you can bring a couple of helicopters to counter that, then only the Fliegerfaust 2s are going to be stopping that. And of course he has these guys. But not all of those will be at the right time at the right place, whereas having a little bit more Fliegerfaust, and I know it's not a great AA unit, but it's the only thing we can get. So we're just going to keep spamming these, and that's why I'm bringing 14 at Hardened. And now you have a little bit of a more rounded deck, or at least that's the way I look at it. Of course, your mileage may vary, and you may have a completely different opinion and hate what I did to this deck. If you did, just import the deck code and make your own adjustments to it. If you did like this deck, please use it and have a game with it. Let me know how it performs. Vensalir, I hope you don't think that I completely messed up your deck, because that was not the setup here. I'm aiming to improve this deck to help you do even better in your mission profile of operating near towns, and making sure that with that you can operate a little bit more effectively while still having a good amount of infantry, a good air cover for your infantry. And with that I think you have a very, very well-rounded setup. If you liked watching this video, please hit the like button below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so by clicking subscribe. If you have a specific video or a specific feature that you'd like explained in Wargame, I have a lot of guides already, but maybe I haven't covered your question yet. Either send me an email at stealth@stealth17gaming.com with your request for a video, or just leave it in a comment below, because I will always be keeping you guys as the main focus. You guys are why I record these videos, so the more input I can get from you guys, the better I can make the videos. For now, thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.